It's Columbus Day, so Washington, D.C. has the day off, but all the rest of us are working. And, it's Columbus Day. Are we still celebrating? Actually, we're not so much anymore. A rapist and murderer and child sex slave participant. Columbus actually wrote back to the King of Spain saying, these slaves, they're as good as gold. And, here's what he said. He said, they are well built with good bodies and handsome features. They do not bear arms and do not know them, for I showed them a sword, and they took it by the edge and cut themselves out of ignorance. They have no iron. Their spears are made of cane. They would make fine servants. With 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want. Here there are so many of these slaves, although they are living things, they are good as gold. And, of course, Columbus went on to say the 10-year-old girls that was actually the top of the market for them. But, Kavanaugh was sworn in over the, so, but it seems like, we don't celebrate Columbus Day anymore outside of maybe the Italian-American community, which does make a lot of sense because it was Spain who funded this thing, wasn't it? But in any case, I think the days of Columbus Day are over. And in fact, in many parts of America, this is Indigenous Peoples Day. And for that, I tip my hat. We did our book reading this morning on our TV side with Warrior Is, this book by Harley and Robin Zephyr, which is just an absolutely brilliant book about the history of Native Americans, particularly the 18th and 19th century histories. It's just remarkable. Meanwhile, Brett Kavanaugh was sworn in over the weekend. There's going to be another. They're swearing him in like 4 times, right? Roberts did it, and then Trump is going to do it, and somebody else did it, and I don't know what all, but they're doing all these quote ceremonies because they're so happy about this, and people are walking around going, oh, we're so sad we lost this one. Hey, this one was lost when the vote came in from Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. The Kavanaugh thing was sealed with the election of Trump. Trump campaigned, I'm going to put people on the court who are going to overturn Roe v. Wade and who are going to interpret the Constitution using originalism. In other words, they're going to think the same way the white male slaveholding founders did back when women and people of color had no right to vote, no rights under the Constitution, and of course, slaves weren't even considered in the Constitution, except for purposes in the South, 3/5 of them being counted toward congressional representation. So yeah, originalism. Let's go back to that mindset. Well, they really are. They really are. But let me finish this first thought first. We've got a lot of people going, oh, we're losing, isn't that a terrible thing? I don't think so. Like I said, this confirmation was a done deal 2 years ago, as was Gorsuch's. You put a Republican in the White House, you're going to get right-wing crazies on the Supreme Court. The fact of the matter is that if it hadn't been for the Bush v. Gore decision, and it hadn't been for Russian intervention in the election, both of which flipped our elections, Al Gore would have been president, and Hillary Clinton would have been president. And right now, there would be a 7-2 progressive majority on the Supreme Court, had it not been for these two events. But in any case, we got Trump, we got Kavanaugh. What a shock. But are we losing? Come on, Trump just mobilized millions of women. Back in 91, when they did this to Clarence Thomas in the election in 92, women just mopped the floor with men. Terrible metaphor, isn't it? You get my point. This is when Dianne Feinstein got into the Senate, and Patty Murray from Washington State. They both ran for the Senate as a result of how Anita Hill was treated in the Clarence Thomas hearings, and they're still there. Plus, Trump is being investigated by Mueller. Plus, Trump is being investigated by New York State for a $500 million tax fraud. Plus, there's an election coming in 3.5 weeks. We'll see who's winning. We'll see. I mean, we can have this conversation after the election, but right now, I'm not willing to despair. In fact, I would say, you know, Charles Blow has a piece in the New York Times today. Maybe it was yesterday. Yeah, it was yesterday, October 7th. Titled, "Liberals, This is War." And what he's pointing out is that this is part of a conservative plan. And by conservatives, we're talking about privileged white men and the women who are subservient to them. That this is a much larger power play by these so-called conservatives to enshrine and protect white male power in the United States. You know, in a way, it reminds me of apartheid South Africa. As the white men who ran apartheid South Africa gave up their power, which was a pretty remarkable thing when you think about it. There was this period of transition. Well, we're not going through that period of transition. You know, we sort of started that in the 60s, the civil rights movement and all that. But now, you know, they want to roll all that back. And in fact, the Supreme Court has already gutted the Voting Rights Act. And this is why they talk about originalism, right? Originalism is just a way of saying, you know, those founders who owned slaves and, you know, beat them and raped them. Black people were not human, didn't have the right to vote, didn't have the right to work, didn't have the right to, frankly, live. Women couldn't vote, couldn't participate, couldn't own property. Poor white men couldn't vote in many states. The founders were a bunch of rich, powerful white men who didn't want true democracy, writes Charles Blow. And in fact, he says they were dreadfully afraid of it, and he's right. It's why we got the Electoral College. It's why you know, small states have 2 senators. And now a bunch of rich, powerful white men want to change the way our court systems work so that we're looking at laws in the context of that, you know, through that frame. For example, I mean, this is what it's all about with regard to Trump's hysteria around illegal immigration. Those are not privileged white men coming into this country. In fact, he wants to change our immigration laws so that only privileged white men and their women can come into this country. That's why he's demonizing the visa lottery program. It mostly has people from Africa coming into the United States. This is what voter disenfranchisement is all about. This is what, you know, interstate cross-check and Chris Kobach is all about. Find those people who have common last names, blacks, African Americans, Latinos, and Asians, and get them off the voting rolls. Ultimately, this is what their call for a constitutional convention is all about. I mean, this is the direction it is all going right now.